So ACT's announcement is that we want to put productivity back at the centre of what the next government does. And specifically, we want to set a goal of achieving top 10 productivity growth status within the next growth cycle. Now that may occur over a course of 10 to 15 years, but if we don't start thinking about it now, we will look back in 20 years' time and look at what we could afford in terms of healthcare and medication and adaptation to climate back in the golden days of 2023 and find that we have slid further and become even poorer. In order to understand what boosting productivity requires, you have to look at what components go into it. And there are really three. There is capital investment. Australia has grown faster than New Zealand over the past 30 years, largely because each worker has had more investment, more capital has gone in to the tools and equipment that Australian workers work with than it has in New Zealand. We must open ourselves up to a greater extent of foreign direct investment. Right now we're one of the hardest places in the world to actually send money to as a business. Our Overseas Investment Office ensures and sees to it that it's difficult to invest here. We need more openness. We need a regulatory environment and a tax environment that mean if you invest in New Zealand, you don't fear that you will lose more of what you've put in to higher taxes or regulatory capture that mean you can't get a return on your investment. We also need more skills. Our education system has pursued so many goals, but it hasn't been working hard to ensure that New Zealand students are back up the league tables with the mathematics, the science, the literacy that allow them to work closer to the technology frontier. Instead, we've achieved a range of social goals through our education policy that simply has not been good enough, and it's been worse for the most disadvantaged students, which is the true tragedy of successive governments' approach to education. Finally, you need innovation. And once you've got the capital investment, you've got the skills, you've allowed people to come and bring their skills as immigrants and their capital as investors, you need a culture of creativity and success. We don't have that right now, particularly for the last 6 years. The government has run one market study review and regulatory initiative after another. The underlying tone of this message is that somehow, someone, somewhere is up to no good, and if only there was another rule, a review, a market study or a regulation, another grocery commissioner, they could be forced to do well. In actual fact, business is a force for good. It's a voluntary cooperation amongst people who come together, investors with their savings, entrepreneurs with their ideas, workers with their time and talents, and customers with their needs, to cooperate and produce together what they could not do alone. We think that that is a beautiful example of human cooperation. Within this policy document, there are a number of initiatives that ACT has now long proposed around infrastructure investment, Resource Management Act reform, immigration reform, foreign direct investment reform, in order to boost productivity. What we're doing today is making the point that productivity has been long gone from New Zealand's political discourse. If you go back 15 years, you could find that when a new government came in, they mentioned productivity half a dozen times in their speech from the throne. Today, it'd be lucky if a new incoming government mentioned it once or twice, and usually out of context. We believe that productivity must be put back at the centre of everything government does. There should be a goal of ensuring we reach top 10 status in terms of productivity growth in the world. Only then will we be able to look back in 20 years' time and say we can afford. Well, they're being very productive off there. They're going to possibly save some capital assets. I mean, that's important. But only then can we be sure that New Zealand will be able to look back in 20 years' time and say we can afford to adapt to climate change, look after an ageing population, have the healthcare, the mental health, and all of those other things that people talk about as needing. But actually, you have to start with productivity first.